So, Anne, I wanted to ask you what you thought about President Obama's remark, which he has made frequently, that he is looking for a Supreme Court justice with empathy. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it exposes him to some political debate that really I don't think is actually quite fair, because I think that, I was looking at his quote today, what he actually said, I view that quality of empathy, of understanding and identifying people's hopes and struggles as an essential ingredient for arriving at just decisions and outcomes. So I think it's something that a lot of law professors, legal academics think, which is that legal reasoning has a component of emotion. I personally believe that. I think that human reasoning includes an emotional element, and that you can't get through a complex decision unless you're going with some emotional cues. So the emotional structure is part of the mind, and it's necessary to reason, whether people try to exclude it or not. So it's not just saying, I want judges who will do whatever they feel, who will sort of empathize and sympathize with people and decide outcomes that way. I think it's a recognition that emotion genuinely is part of reasoning, and therefore the soundness of a person's emotions and the tendencies of their emotions really are something that we ought to consider and shouldn't be excluded. But I think it gives a lot of fuel to Obama's enemies and to conservatives who want to take potshots at his nomination, that he puts it in those terms because it's so susceptible to being misunderstood.
That's interesting. So another thing that Obama has been talking about, these abstract statements that he makes, in some ways, to some degree, they feel like anybody could say them, they could apply to practically anyone he might choose. But one of the other remarks he made that struck me is this emphasis that he wants a justice who will think about how his or her rulings apply to people's everyday lives, to how safe they feel in the home and how welcome they feel in their nation. Did that strike you in any particular way?
I think that's the same point, which is that law isn't just an abstraction. It's not math. It's something that is related to the world, and that the whole substance of it is interconnected with the world. And our connection as minds to the world is done with emotion.
Do you think
and I think all of that fits together. I just don't think it's so extraordinary. I think it's just common sense.
And do you think it could apply really across the political spectrum to any justice? Would you say that a justice on the right, like Justice Scalia or Justice Thomas, also ascribes to these same principles and demonstrates them?
Well, I don't know if they openly embrace those principles. I think that they may take the position that emotion must be excluded and that they really are working from texts and that there are right answers that are embedded already in the language that they have to interpret. But I think that there is emotion behind the feeling that they need to do that. And I appreciate what they're doing, and I think excluding some sorts of passion really is part of the judicial role. But the idea that you can squeeze all emotion, all humanity out of what you're doing, I don't think you really can. And I think that if you think you can, maybe the emotion that you have really is a kind of coldness and selfishness, or an alliance with some interests that don't get named on Obama's list, the poor, the minorities, and so forth. You may have sympathies that lie somewhere else. So I just don't buy the denial of that, although I understand why people in the judicial role think that they should pose as if they do exclude those things. But I'm not buying it, and I don't think sensible people really do buy that. Do you?
No, I don't buy it either. I find it to be a great relief to have it kind of flushed out as part of the equation as opposed to pretending that it doesn't play a role, because I agree with you that it does.